We're going to move into our albums and songs section now. And the way we do this is each person takes their turn saying their number 10 album and number 10 song, so on and so forth and so on and so forth. You get the deal. And it's sort of the same way, just talking about whatever you want to talk about in regards to that. So yeah, it's pretty simple. It's not that complicated. So yeah. So yeah, I mean, overall, I thought this year was another pretty solid year for music. I didn't do a great job of listening to music this year, but I got a lot of listening in this week particularly, so I do have a lot of recency bias with my ratings. But I really found a lot of good stuff in this last week that I had missed out on. So with that being said, my number 10 album is more of a placeholder just because this band is just my favorite working band currently, and it's the self-titled deluxe of Era's self-titled. And it's sort of a mixture of, last year's album of the year. I just wanted to put it at number 10 because there are other albums that actually came out this year. But like the songs that got added to it were really great. One of them is also in my top 10 songs, but that'll come later. This album, I said everything I need to say about this album last year. Era is just the best working metal band out there right now, without question. And they just added some really cool songs. 2 covers. One from Nine Inch Nails. The other one from, I forgot who it was, but and then a couple of really cool, really good songs. Original songs, one of them which is in my top 10. My number 10 song is by a band that I actually think is probably the most exciting metal band right now, and it's Shade Astray by Invent Animate. I just love this band. One of their songs, The Sun As It Never Sleeps, was in my top 10 last year. I just love this band through and through. Their sound is just indescribably, they have this really broad sound to them. Their lead singer is just excellent. I just love this song. I listened to it 2 days ago and it shot into my top 10 within just a few listens. Again, nothing crazy to say about this. I just think his Unqueens and Queens both are just really improving, and I think this band is without a doubt the most exciting new. They're not really super new, but they're really just now getting into a sound that's getting them more exposure. So their sound is just awesome, and I think they're the most exciting metal band right now for sure. So
my number 10 is from a band that I just discovered this year from some reviewers that I watched, but they were recommending this band big time, and so I checked them out. It sounded right up my alley based on the reviews, and yeah, it really was. This band is called Gang of Youths, and the album is called Angel in Real Time, and it's basically a modern classic rock album, in my opinion. Modern stadium rock, maybe more accurately, because there's a lot of big guitar work on here, a lot of soaring choruses. It just feels like a rock album that you don't see very often. A lot of the mainstream rock genre is sadly dying, in my opinion. A lot of my worst albums this year were from mainstream rock, which disappointed me so much. But it's nice to see the underground bands are still keeping the genre going, and this would be one that I would say is an example of that. I also think this album is actually inspiring because it sort of talks about the immigrant experience, as the lead singer is an immigrant, a European immigrant specifically, and there's a really particularly inspiring song on it called "The Kingdom Is Within You," where he talks about in the perspective of this other person who was used and abused by other people from the country they emigrated to, but how this person still tries to be positive and remember their own culture within them. I thought that was a really powerful song, and I think there's just a lot of really catchy cuts on here. I think there's a lot of stuff that is actively inspiring and isn't cheesy when it tries to do it. So definitely one of the best rock albums of the year, and I'm really glad I checked this out. Then at my number 10 spot, and I will be talking about this band shortly, but is the song Zen by North Lane. This one sort of came out of nowhere for me on the North Lane album because for the longest time I would say that Carbonize was probably my favorite on the album, and that one's still a banger, don't get me wrong, I really like that one. But Zen, it was a slow burn on me, but the more I heard it, the more I absolutely adored it. it sees Northlane going a more rock direction, which I really liked for them, while still incorporating the sound of their Obsidian album in there with the electronics and stuff like that. And the chorus is just sort of beautiful. It's sort of one of the most soaring choruses I've heard, and it just has this vibe where it feels like you're off in space when you close your eyes and listen to it. And that guitar solo is so good. I love that this band is doing new things with their sound. I know that Obsidian was maybe a bit of a controversial album, but I really liked what Northlane did on it. I think they changed their sound in really cool ways. And Zen is sort of proof of that. And I really like the ending of Zen too, where it just sort of lets the song breathe for about a minute and a half. It's sort of eerie, but also really works.
Yeah. Again, this is kind of another situation where my bottom ones aren't really a lot to talk about. This is a band that made a really nice comeback back in, I want to say it was 2017, I think. Yeah, it was 2017, maybe 2016. But this album, it was like okay. Again, my bottom stuff isn't really a whole lot to talk about. My number 9 is Reaching Hypercritical by Palisades. I like their new lead vocalist. I think the strength of the album actually lied in its instrumentals more than anything. I think there's a lot of variety here. There's a lot of, I don't think he's better than Louis by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a good replacement. But the album has some really nice cuts to it. Again, nothing special that I'll say really blew my mind. It just kind of was there because, again, I did a terrible job of listening to music this year. My number 9 song kind of indicates how strong, I think for me this year, individual songs were stronger than full albums, personally, which is kind of the opposite of how it always happens. My number 9 song indicates how much, like my number 9 song is already like a 4.3 out of 5 or something like that. For an individual song, but it's Neon Grave by Dayseeker. This is one of the bands that I have really loved over the years. They started out as a really hardcore metal band, and have sort of grown into almost this. I say this with a little bit of sadness, but almost the procession of Too Close to Touch.
I can see that.
I love Joey's voice. He has grown so much as a Queen vocalist. And this album brings back a lot of their signature unqueen vocals at times. But this song is just so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So beautiful. Like, the album has a lot of really emotional, heartbreaking, themes to it. And this song just like sort of, it's just saying like this one grave is the one that's like, shining. It's just a beautiful song. Beautiful song through and through.
Speaking of that, Palisades, the lead vocalist is not the vocalist anymore. I don't know if you knew
the
that.
guy they just got again?
Yep.
Oh.
He's out. The
Wow.
the vocalist for the new album, he's gone.
Wow. Okay.
Which is like, are they going to bring their old lead vocalist back? Which would be awesome. I'd love to see him back.
I like Louis a lot better. That's kind of, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. My number 9, and personally for me this year, this started out as a year that maybe wasn't quite as strong as last year, but really sort of came through in the middle to the end of the year, I think. It became a really strong year.
Completely agree with that.
In the second half. But my number 9 is a pick that I thought would be a little bit higher, but it's still, make no mistake, an excellent album, and that is Northlane's Obsidian. Hot take, I might like this one a little better than Alien. I know.
Aliens is a masterpiece.
But I love Alien, don't get me wrong, but I actually didn't have Alien in my top 10, I don't think, when we were talking about that year, if I remember.
I did.
It was a significant honorable mention.
I love that album.
But I really loved what Northlane did with their sound on this album. The EDM stuff specifically was such an intriguing choice, but it worked super well for them, and I think they made an album that is just a totally really unique vision, continuing sort of the new metal stuff they were doing with Alien as well, and I think there's just so many great tracks on this album. Carbonized is still one that stands out to me, and I love how they're just taking like the horrible people of the metal community to task, the ones who have like committed sexual crimes, and they even sort of call out the lead vocalist of As I Lay Dying, who I don't know if you know, but he sort of put a hit on his own wife.
Oh yeah.
I just sort of love that they're doing that. I think it's a ballsy song that where its aggressiveness is earned. Clarity is sort of a classic North Lane song. They don't like leave their alien sound behind entirely. I think Clarity and what is it called? The Running Out of Time one, Clockwork. Those are both sort of classic North Lane as well. But I think also the ones where they go super risky are really cool too. I think Cypher is such an intriguing track that really snuck up on me. And for as repetitive as Is This a Test started off being, I think that one grew on me quite a bit.
I don't know why repetitive songs I just love more and more with each year. Yeah. I have no idea why.
Enamoretta is gorgeous, the chorus soars, and Obsidian is just sort of brutal. I sort of love the title track as well.
I just love, like when I think of title tracks that just like do what you don't expect them to do, like I always think of Dark Matter, Word Alive, just like, I don't know. It's just so sick when you have a title track that's like, that it's going to be a banger, basically.
And my number 9 song is from a band where their album isn't in my top 10, but their album did grow on me quite a bit, and it's Watcher in the Sky by Ghost. This song, originally my favorite from that album was not this one, but this one came up on me, and I think I just sort of like it because the guitar work in it is just awesome. It is classic arena rock, and it is pretty over the top too, which is sort of what Ghost was going for on their whole album. I think they nailed that vibe the best on here though. And I think the sort of epic bigger than life feels earned because they're talking about this idea of constantly advancing in science, but ironically regressing in some ways too, like not using science for the things that we should be using it for. It's a really interesting cut, and I think they could be talking about like looking to government entities to play as God too, as a sort of watcher in the sky, like trying to search for someone to look up to, but really we shouldn't be trying to put certain people on pedestals or whatever. I think it's a fun track, and I really like what Ghost does on it. And while I know that a lot of people viewed Impera as a step down, I think songs like this show that they still are a very talented band.
Yeah, I'll admit my own Ghost was kind of more of a phase for me than anything, but I like some of their stuff. Alrighty. Are we number 8 now?
Yeah,
yes, we're number 8. My number 8 album is a band where their last album was probably one of the worst albums I've ever listened to in my life, and then this one, they just kind of brought it back big time. This is True Power by I Prevail. Now this band started out, I think probably everyone knows how I Prevail started out with their Taylor Swift cover, and then exploded, released their first album, which I can never freaking remember the name of, but I loved that album. Their last album, Trauma, was absolutely dog water terrible. And this album, they kind of brought it back in a big way, and they went a little bit experimental. I loved a lot of the tracks where they went more rap rock.
Yeah, it actually worked on this one, unlike in Trauma.
So, yeah, it felt like they definitely sort of figured out like how to make it work more than just making it sound like rap. They incorporated a little bit of electronics, which as I've gone through the years, I've just learned to appreciate electronics so much more, combined with metal especially. It's also why I love North Lane so much, but the album just has some really nice rap tracks, some really nice soft tracks. The ending song is really nice and melodic. I thought they did the melodic stuff a lot better too. So I think overall the album was a really solid return to form for them, and I hope this is sort of the path they stay on. And obviously the album just has some straight up slap you in the face, I Prevail type of stuff that you'd expect from them. My number 8 song is, oh my gosh, one of the most... Listen, when Era makes a good song, when they make their just beautiful stuff, you just can't you can't get away from it. Sola Absentia is my number 8 song. Era just somehow sort of finds their way into my top 10 somehow every year. And this song is just absolutely gorgeous. It has that, just classic Era, mixture of queens from Jessie Cash, who is still the best Queen vocalist in the industry without competition, and JT Cavey continues to improve time and time again. And this song is just a classic, gorgeous Era song. So yeah, it's just I just cannot speak the praises of Era enough. So yeah.
At number 8 for me is a group who has made my top 10 list, I think, every time they have come out with an album, because they are just, I think they're some of the most talented musicians around from a genre that doesn't usually connect with me, but it is the Punch Brothers' newest album, Hell on Church Street. Now, this album is interesting because albums like this don't usually make my top 10, but this is an entire cover album. Every song is a cover of a song from another album called Church Street. They renamed the album, but what makes this cover album work so well for me is that it sort of doesn't feel like a cover album, in my opinion. It feels like Punch Brothers made it their own sound, and it just sounds distinctly like them. I think every song sounds like one that they could have penned themselves because they are that talented. And I know a lot of these songs are considered sort of like classical bluegrass or folk songs, like The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, which is a closer, is sort of considered a bona fide classic folk song in every sense of the word. But like I said, I think they take the sound and make it their own. I love the instrumentation on here. Every band member is just firing on all cylinders. I always love the banjo on this as well as the mandolin. It's just a beautiful album, and I think it's just a really good listen through and through. I really like what it does. And then my number 8 song also comes from that album, and it is sort of a double song. It is a 7-minute, I would say, progressive folk song called House Carpenter / Jerusalem Ridge. It is technically a combination of 2 songs, but they put it as one song on the album, so I'm counting it as one song. And it is sort of crazy what it does. I think Punch Brothers have done progressive folk songs before, and this one isn't even their best in that genre, but it still shows that they should do that genre more, in my opinion. I think it is what they are best at, when they're sort of doing different things and progressing through different movements in the song. And like I said about the album, it feels like they penned the song themselves with how much passion they're singing out the lyrics. And I love the instrumental parts of this song. There's a lot of them in there, and I think it's one of their best songs to date. I love this band.
My number 7 album is from a band that made a comeback after probably one of the more devastating losses in the metal genre. It's Dark Bloom by We Came as Romans. After Kyle died, was that in 2019, 2020? I don't remember which one it was.
I think it was 2020.
I think it was 2020 as well. That was just one of their, I think still my favorite album by them, Cold Like War. Mm-hmm. Just like that album just absolutely blew me away, and then seeing that happen and hearing some of the stuff on this album, some of the most, heart-wrenching, brutal stuff about what they went through behind the scenes. It's just, Dave Stevens is just one of the most, honest, like, metal vocalists, and like the fact that there are so many songs like that where he just like talks about directly what sort of went behind the scenes. It's just a gut-wrenchingly brutal album emotionally. But I loved it through and through. Had some really strong hitters, like the title song, the title track, Daggers. The ending song is just, oh my gosh, it's a very sad but very at the same time uplifting album in a way. So yeah, I love that We Came as Romans, and I'm so glad they decided to keep making music, because I think they're one of the best in the business, quite frankly. My number 7 song is a song that I listened to yesterday, and it shot into my top songs. I listened to a lot more songs, so to say this one shot up pretty quickly is a huge up to it. But it's a band called Phase One meets Polaris, one of my more recently favorite metal bands, and it's called Icarus. It's got this awesome, so Phase One is basically like an EDM. I don't know if they're a duo or a trio or what. They did something with Era as well that I really liked.
Oh yeah, their Era was really good.
But this song is a little more on the pure hard rock metal side. The song has a lot of energy, a lot of power to it. It's sort of, obviously with the title, linked a little bit to that idea of flying too close to the sun, stuff like that, but it's more about the sound of the song. This Phase One band apparently they just know how to add this interesting electronic depth to every song, and it's a really interesting album overall. So an interesting song overall. Sorry. So yeah, that's that.
Okay, so my number 7 album is one that stayed there all year long. This was an earlier album in the year, but it is one that I really liked, and it's by this newer artist named Lizzie McAlpine, who is sort of, I don't know, I'd describe her sort of folk pop or folk rock, and the album is called 5 Seconds Flat, and I don't have a whole crazy lot to say about it because it is a pretty simple album at its core, but I think it's a really good relationship-driven album. I think it has a lot of really good cuts, and I think it shows her as a really talented songwriter who is just starting to flex her skills. I'm really excited to see what she does in the future because she is very young, but I think that she has a lot of potential. I think she's really talented, and I have a feeling that she could sort of blow up in the future, sort of like a Billie Eilish type or something like that. She's not as, I don't think she's as good as Billie Eilish, but I still did really like her album this year. Doomsday was one of my favorite songs of the year. Not one of my top 10. It would be an honorable mention for me, but I really liked how it just sort of made the ending of a relationship feel like the end of the world. It's very melodramatic, but I really liked that it went there. Reckless Driving was a pretty creative song talking about like two different types in a relationship and how and comparing them to a type of driver, so one being more reckless and willing to take more risks in the relationship versus one being more safe and wanting to stay in the comfort zone, and how their sort of personalities collide. I think this is a really strong album overall, and it's gone a little underrated in my opinion, so that's why it's in my top 10. And then at number 7, which I agree with Joseph that this year was a really strong year for songs, like incredibly strong. It was hard for me to rank my top 10 songs. But at number 7 is a song that has sort of exploded in popularity recently, but I'm glad I was on board even when it wasn't. And that is Just Pretend by Bad Omens.
That's a good one.
I'm going to be talking about Bad Omens later, but I think this is far and away the best cut on The Death of Peace of Mind for my money. And like I said, this song has recently gotten popular. I think it has like 4 million views on YouTube now, whereas it was in the lower range earlier in the year when I decided it was my favorite. But I think this is a really smart relationship cut. I like that it takes an interesting twist where both people in the relationship are in self-denial about just how toxic it is. Like, they're both just waiting for the other person to make the move to end it, but instead they're letting each other drown mutually because they won't make the move to say that, hey, this relationship is bad, we should probably end it. But it's sort of it's a very tragic song, too. I mean, the chorus sort of highlights that, I think, with Noah's, like, best vocal performance, in my opinion. I love his vocals in the chorus. And, then the sort of twist in the song is also really sad, where the reason they're staying in this relationship is that they both are desperately seeking validation. Like, Noah asks, will you say I'm worthy? And it is so sad. You can just feel like he's about to cry when he says that. It's so heartbreaking. And then just the final iteration of the chorus is so powerful, and the way it ends is just chilling. I love this cut. Definitely one of the best songs of the year.
All right, my number 6, no particular song from this album went to my top 10, but I just thought it was a really great album overall, and it's something I did not realize had happened until sometime last week, and so Billy Howerdel is the guitarist, one of the guitarists from A Perfect Circle, and he did his own solo project this year, which I had no idea of. I don't know how I didn't, because I'm pretty much fully ingested in whatever, Maynard James Keenan or anything in that realm of interest. So when I saw Billy Howerdel did a solo project, I was like, obviously I have to check that out. It's very much so, like, it reminds me so much of A Perfect Circle because he really was one who started it. It was like, it just gave me a huge smile because, like, I love that style of, like, it's very much still more alternative, sort of classic 80s rock style. There's a lot of really good individual cuts, such as The Same Again would have been one of my honorable mentions. The starting track, Selfish Hearts, is really great, self-explanatory based on the title. And the ending song, Stars, is really beautiful. So I just thought, again, I won't say anything much about the album as a whole. I just really, or as like, there's not a lot to talk about other than I just thought it was a really nice album, and it was nice to hear his voice again since he wasn't in the last A Perfect Circle album at all, vocally at least. My number 6 song, you mentioned your favorite song from North Lane snuck up on you. Mine did as well. My favorite song from that album that also lands at number 6 of my favorite songs is Inamorata. I just love the chorus of the song. Just, the basic theme of how your love makes you whole again. I don't know if you got the vibe that it's sort of like a creepy making you whole again or not type of deal, but it's a very nice, simple rock song. And it kind of surprised me that it was my favorite compared to, Carbonized, which I would have also said was my favorite up until a point, but Inamorata just kept on growing on me. So yeah, I just love that song, and I will be talking about that album very, 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 very soon.
Okay, my number 6 pick comes from an artist who has become what I think is my favorite rapper of all time, Denzel Curry. And the name of the album is Melt My Eyes, See Your Future. This is such a cool album, and I think really sees a good evolution of his sound. A lot of people said this is the first time they took him seriously, which I was sort of disappointed by because I've always thought he was talented in his other albums. I do think this one is his best. I think it's hard to deny that for anyone who's heard it. But to say that people didn't take him seriously before, I think, is an inaccurate assessment, in my opinion. But nevertheless, I think it's a solid album. I think it has a really good thematic arc of him sort of taking responsibility for being a more important voice in terms of speaking for the African American culture. And nevertheless, having the fun in the midst of it. I think there's a lot of fun cuts on here. A lot of cuts where he shows sort of more of his nerdy side. Like there's a song called X-Wing with a lot of fun little Star Wars references in it. There's a song where he collaborates with T-Pain that is sort of silly. But there's also some cuts that are much darker and much more serious that I really enjoyed. And one of those would be in my number 6 spot for my favorite song, for my 6th favorite song, Zatoichi, which is by Denzel Curry. And I think the title of that song is a reference to some sort of anime or something, but I couldn't say for sure. And the way the music video is shot certainly feels like it was inspired by Japanese culture for sure. It's a pretty cool music video, probably one of my favorite music videos of the year. But it feels more like a punk rap song in ways. There's some guitar work in it and some driving drum work that's really good. The chorus is much more rock inspired than what I was expecting, but I really enjoy the chorus. It's a lot of fun, and Denzel's raps in it are expertly done. It just shows him as one of the best to do it in the genre, I think, and I think it's my favorite cut by him. But yeah, his album and this song were both excellent.
Alrighty. I said I would talk about this album very, 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 very soon, and I will be. My number 5 album of the year, and this is, again, an extremely strong top 5. This is already probably a 4.5, 4.6, is Obsidian by North Lane. To see it down at top 5 is very shocking, considering this, when it came out, this was my favorite album of the year, pretty much up till other stuff started coming out. So, this album is extremely strong. It finds the lead vocalist Marcus Bridges. I love him. I think I personally, I'll get hanged at the gallows for this, but I think he's way better than their last lead vocalist personally by a mile. And this album is really nice and experimental. Even though I love Alien, which is pretty much just a straightforward nu metal album through and through, this album finds them experimenting with all sorts of different things. While keeping that sort of sound intact at the core. I definitely loved the experimentation they did there with this album overall. It would have absolutely been my top if other things hadn't come out, but they did. So I still really love this album, and North Lane is definitely in my top running for bands that I really love this year, or that I really love in general, that I will be following a lot more due to their stuff that has happened recently. So yeah. I talked about really liking repetitive songs for some reason. And my number 5 song is one that some may consider repetitive. It is Who Are You by Bad Omens.
Not one I would have expected from you.
This is one of the more interesting cuts from the album. It's a very contemplative, quiet song. I love Noah's high-pitched vocals. Anything that where he used the high-pitched stuff, he hadn't done that before, and he has improved so much in that aspect. And I just love this particular album, this particular song. Just asking the question of who are you over and over again. It's a very contemplative, thought-provoking song with a really nice, really nice vocals. I think probably my favorite vocal performance from him, aside from Just Pretend, which probably would have been my favorite song if this one hadn't have just been one that I liked better. So yeah.
Speaking of Bad Omens, at number 5 for me is their album The Death of Peace of Mind. This was... I was so happy to finally be able to put this band in my top 10 because I've always viewed them as a very talented band, but I always have viewed Bad Omens as a little too indebted to their influences, like their primary influence obviously being Bring Me the Horizon. I've always really even loved individual songs from their albums, but neither of their first 2 albums really connected with me, and I even think their first album is rather bad. I like their second album a little better, but this one, it clicked with me from the first time I heard it, and I had a feeling this one was going to click with me a little bit more because I loved the lead singles. The title track is one of the top 3 best on the album still. I've played that one to death. The chorus is so addicting on that song, and it does the thing where it sort of cuts out the music and just goes for a more poppy vibe better than a lot of other songs that tried to copy it. I think a lot of bands this year tried to do what Bad Omens did with the whole bringing in intense guitars, cutting them out for poppy vibes, and then going back into that. And a lot of them didn't do it as well as they did. I think they just nailed that vibe. I also really like a Villain. I really love the sort of interlude that builds up to it as well. It feels really menacing. I like the orchestration in it. Concrete Jungle was a really good introduction to the album too, I think. Artificial Suicide is a banger. I do admit I wish they had a couple more songs in that vein, because I do like when they go into super intense.
I mean,
well.
I think we've said this 1,000 times about Bad Omens. They're at their best when they're either full metal or full soft.
Yeah.
Nothing in between. But that song, it was just so randomly sprinkled in at the end that it catches you by surprise, and it's actually very effective.
Yeah.
I might add. So.
Yeah. And I mean, the full poppy cuts on this album, because this album is in many ways a pop album.
It's an alternative rock. You can just call it how it is.
Bad Decisions is such a fun song that really shot up with me the more I heard it. It's a really good vibe, especially at night. I just think this was overall a really strong album with a lot of really Bad Omens' strongest cuts, and it consistently worked from front to back. And I think it told a story too. I think it was a concept album in many ways. And even for as much as the closing track sort of was their most Bring Me the Horizon sounding track, I still really liked it. Especially like the verses with just the drum work and him singing. I really liked that song. But I think this was a really strong album, and I would love to see Bad Omens continue down this route, because I think they're talented at this.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is the route they will take.
Oh, hold on. I didn't do my song.
Yeah.
Now, my number 5 song, and I will be talking about this band later, but is Without Me by Dayseeker. That's a good one too. This song is... I have listened to this song countless times this year. It is so addicting. And while I may not like it as much as Sleep Talk, which was my favorite song of the year that it came out, if I remember right, but this one comes pretty close for me. It is full-on pop in every sense of the word, but it works. And if Dayseeker keeps on doing pop cuts like this, they can go this route all they want, in my opinion, because they are so good at it. And I really I love the progressions this song goes through. Like in the first iteration of the chorus, just cutting all the sound out, just having Rory sing, and his vocals sound so gorgeous as always. And then having the drop happen, which is probably my favorite musical moment of the year. The electronic drop is so good, and sort of shows the emotion in a way that vocals couldn't. And then in the second iteration of the course, bringing in the guitars and making it more intense. And then in the last iteration, just having Rory sort of show off, which I think he earns, like just showing off his singing prowess. He is just a very talented vocalist. And it is another breakup song from Dayseeker like Sleep Talk, but I think they nailed them, so this is a perfect song, in my opinion. So good.
All right, getting into number 4. My number 4 album is probably one of the more controversial question mark albums from a band that is widely considered to be one of the more consistently like not changing their sound type of bands. But it is The End So Far by Slipknot. Now listen, I love the direction that Slipknot has gone. We Are Not Your Kind was also in my top 10 in 2019. And this album follows through on the sort of types of experimentation they did on We Are Not Your Kind, and it doubles down and multiplies it by 2 again just for fun. This whole album is just insanity. It's just experimentation after experimentation after experimentation. I just absolutely love what they. I don't know. I know some people just like it when Slipknot do their pure thing, like, you know, when their lead single was Chapeltown Rag, you're like, okay, this is gonna be volume 3, volume 2. Mm-hmm. But they completely did not do that. I'm gonna pull up the album because there's a lot of specific songs that I never remember the name of that I want to talk about. The lead song, the first song isn't really. The Dying Song was definitely in the running for one of my favorite songs of the year, if not for my favorite song of the year, which I will talk about later. Well, not one of my favorite songs. Anyways, ignore me. There's Hive Mind would be one of the ones you'd consider more of a classic. Warranty following it up. Medicine for the Dead is one of their more interesting tracks that really grew on me over time. Yeah. And even their softer stuff, like towards the ending of the album, a lot of the songs are just kind of soft and a mix between their more traditional rock side. But I don't know. I know a lot of people didn't really care for this album. I loved it. I didn't like it as much as We Are Not Your Kind, but I thought it was a really solid album with, Corey Taylor just continuing to improve in vocals in every range. And I just think, I don't know who their drummer, I don't know what this guy's on. Just probably some of my favorite drumming of all time in an album. So yeah. And my number 4 song is from a band that I completely forgot about because their album 2 albums ago was one of my favorites for the year that it released. But this is Sabotage by 1,000 Below. And this song, I just could not stop playing it after I listened to it. This is undoubtedly my favorite song from the album. It's a great cut with great vocals. Mm-hmm. The lead singer has one of the most interesting voices, both clean and unqueen, that I've listened to. I love the passion that this band has. Their album, The Love You Let Too Close, was one of my favorite albums of its time. They kind of, I don't know if they didn't have that passion in their second album or what, but like their second album just did not resonate with me. But their newest album, which I'll talk about later, it brought back a lot more of that passion, that bombastic energy that reminded me why I loved them. So yeah, that song particularly just like could not, one of those that you won't be able to get out of your head.
Mm-hmm. Okay, at number 4 for me is Dayseeker's album Dark Sun. I was very happy to put Dayseeker high on my list once again, and I think they deserve it once again. Which I don't think this album is as good as Sleep Talk. I don't think they'll make an album quite like that again, which nailed its vibe so effortlessly. But this one is still pretty close for me. And yeah, it does see them going much more poppy direction. Not as much clean vocals aside from the first 2 songs on the album. They dish them almost entirely for the rest of the album, but I love Rory's clean so much that it did not bother me a single bit. And I still think that they made a very good, very quality pop album overall. I agree with Joseph that Neon Grave is an excellent song, and I would have liked to have seen a couple more in that vein on the album, but It is still a really good cut. I also like the opener Dream State. I think they made a good choice by beginning with two songs that were more reminiscent of Sleep Talk that sort of effectively transitioned you into things. And then I would say like Without Me is the definitive transition into the pop sound, which still has remnants of their first album. So I think they did a really good job of bringing you into their sound and slowly opening it up. But those are the three big tracks, but there shouldn't be other tracks that go unnoticed either. I think Homesick is super catchy and has a really cool sort of vocal EDM breakdown that works pretty well. Midnight Eternal is a great build up to the title track, which I think is probably my second favorite song on the album. I love the title track. It more feels like a dance party, weirdly enough, than anything. It feels meant for the nightclub, especially like the sort of EDM chorus that it has. And I think it's sort of purposeful because it's like a song about trying to find hope in darkness, and I think it sort of nails the main themes of the album, because the album is a lot about loss of like both death and relationships, and a lot of the album is a dedication to Rory's dad, which I found very touching. But I really love the album is sort of tear-jerking when it ends with like Parallel, which is about like Rory wanting to find his dad in the afterlife, and it's a really heart-wrenching song, and then ending off with Hazel, which is just such a huge song, larger than life, and it's sort of fitting because it's about the birth of his daughter, who he sees like hope for new life in, and it's really beautiful and inspiring, and it sort of makes the payoff all worth it. I think this is a superb album from Dayseeker, and it's one that just works really well for them, and I'm open to whatever they want to do, because they've proven they can nail all sorts of sounds. Then my number 4 song is by a new artist this year. I have a lot of more newer artists at the top of my list, which I think is pretty cool. But at number 4 is this song called Family Tree by Ethel Cain. And the interesting thing about this artist is that her artist name is not her real name. She's playing a character, essentially. Although the character is very inspired by her. And I'll be talking about her album shortly, but this song is sort of her talking about her religious trauma represented by the crosses on her body. And it's a very eerie song too. It's 7 minutes, but it stays pretty creepy. It feels almost like a horror track in some ways. And it sort of makes sense because she's playing a character who has sort of lost herself because of all the trauma she's experienced, and she says things like, "Let Christ forgive me for the bones I'm hiding and the bones I'm about to leave," and it's really eerie and chilling. And then there's this sort of guitar explosion that happens that sort of comes out of nowhere, but just it sent immediate chills up my spine when I heard it, and it's probably another one of my favorite musical moments in the year. I think it's a really creative track, and I think it really represents the album that it comes from very well.
All right. My number 3 album is Dark Sun by Dayseeker. James said literally everything I have to say about it, so I literally have nothing to add. It's just a fantastic album through and through. It's got this really cool theme. I don't know, the album cover is kind of sick, but
yeah.
And I just thought, like, you know, when I get one song you didn't talk about that I loved the more I listened to it was Dancing When You're
Crying While You're
Dancing.
That's a good one.
That one was a great track, and like you said, everything else, every song is just like, it just kind of builds on itself with the emotional with the emotions and stuff like that. And like you said, a lot of the themes of the album are very sad and very gut-wrenching. It does end in a very inspiring note, so it's like, it's definitely one of those albums that progresses and leaves you like very satisfied with how it went. So yeah. My number 3 song is from a band that will probably always be in my top 3, guaranteed, every single year. And this is Blackwater by Time the Evaluator. I had a feeling they'd be there. Listen, man, if you're not Time the Evaluator, you're not my favorite band right now. I cannot get over the way this band uses electronics and combines it with metal, and it's just like, they just have this I don't know what to call it, this intoxicating sound that just, like, you know, their album how fleeting, how fragile is unquestionably my most listened to album of all time. And even though they lost that vocalist, they had a replacement that didn't work out. This new guy is way better than the last guy, not the guy before that, who was still the best one. But this song is just, it's just, I think it's probably just talking about corruption, Blackwater, the idea, that sort of idea. It's just a great, catchy, sort of classic Time the Evaluator sounding song. And a new lead vocalist bringing out the Unqueens in his first song is a little bit ballsy, but I loved it. And this just feels like the way they are going to go now, like with this guy, and it just sounds right. It feels right. Seeing they've released 4 singles, I've only listened to 2 because I just want to wait for their album, which I pray to the Lord above is going to come out next year. Please
come out next year so we can put you at number 1 both.
It'll be guaranteed number 1 if you do that. So yeah, that is that.
All right, my number 3 is from the artist I just talked about, song-wise, Ethel Cain's album Preacher's Daughter. And this is a concept album through and through. I am a huge sucker for concept albums. And this one is just sort of terrifying in reality. It feels like you're listening to a religious horror movie, which is right up my alley. And it goes there. It really goes there. I mean, the last song literally ends with cannibalism. I'm not even joking. It is dark. It is creepy. And it just works so well. I think musically it has a really interesting vibe to it. It is of a genre called slowcore, which is interesting. I've never heard of slowcore before. But it's basically like lots of very dense guitar and drum work on top of like beautiful singing. But there's also like some country vibes to this album as well. Some just straight up rock vibes as well. And even some pop ones, like in this song called American Teenager, which feels like it is a dark, it's weird to describe. It sounds like a dark Taylor Swift song. I don't know how else to describe it. It's so interesting though. It works at what it does. And then there's a song like called Ptolemea, which is like pure metal in my opinion. It even has like a scream from Ethel that is harrowing. And when you listen to what happens in context of the song, the scream becomes a lot more dark. But yeah, the album is just incredible. I think it tells a really compelling story, and I love it. It really snuck up on me, but it works so well. And then at number 3 is an artist that I will stand by as their album getting way too much hate. And this song is proof of that, in my opinion.
I see it coming.
But it is
I see it from a mile
Blue
away.
Velvet by Thornhill. I adore this song. I adore it. It is so beautiful, in my opinion. I love the way the vibe it has, I guess you could say. It embraces the sound that Thornhill went for on this new album, and I think it's just a really good love song with a little bit of a creepy tone to it as well that I like. There's a little bit of a hesitance in the song as well. Like when you hear Jacob singing "I'm enough to keep you safe," you almost wonder if he is actually safe or not, just because of the way the verses are presented in this more creepy way. But I think his vocals are gorgeous on this song. My only complaint is I wish I could hear them a little more, but I also know that's the style they were going for on the album, and the style worked for me, especially on this song. And I really like the quiet moments when they do let his voice shine, and the chorus is it is the most gorgeous chorus I heard this year. I love it. And I love the ending that goes more epic as well. It's just massive, and it ends the song off in a very satisfying way. Yeah, this song has stuck with me all year long.
All right, my number 2 album is an album that is consistently. It just feels filled with the type of passion that got me into this band, and it's Hell Finds You Everywhere by 1000 Below. I would say I love this band, except for the fact that they have 3 albums out, and it's hard to say that I really liked their last album. Their album 2 albums ago, which is The Love You Let Too Close, is a great album. This one's a little bit more of a maturity of that sound, a more sort of streamlined version of that. but it still has their classic, like, the lead vocalist is one of the more passionate screamers that I've heard. His unclean vocals are one of the more unique unclean vocals that I've listened to over time. This new album just has so many nice cuts. I'm not stalling to pull it up on YouTube. But yeah, I just love this album. Sort of the theme. It's just sort of in the title. All these sort of dark, melodic, sort of introspective cuts about, you know, it's hard to, like, because I listened to this album so recently, it's hard to, like, find the particular theme, but the general idea is, you know, hell finds you everywhere. You're all these different cuts about, you know, it's probably very personal, but I just, you know, Silent Season, one of the more catchy, straight up, almost pop song in a way, but, you know, the ending track is very emotional, heart-wrenching, All I've Left to Give. And I really liked the beginning title track as well, Hell Finds You Everywhere, just sort of kind of sets the tone, sets the mood for the entire thing. So overall, really great album that makes me hopeful that maybe this band is sort of finding a middle ground between its more hard, you know, metal sound versus the sort of soft side that they seem to have taken into consideration recently. My number 2 song is not again, all the songs this year are, this is the year of, I had no idea this song would be in my top 10, but here we are. It's Yen by Slipknot. It's my favorite song from the album. If we're talking about creepy love songs, this matches, if not beats out, any of the creepy love songs you can think of. When the basic lead of the chorus is, I would die for, as the knife goes in, cuts across my skin, and as my death begins, I want to know that I would die for you. Like, yeah, that's Slipknot, if you've ever heard Slipknot. Mm-hmm. And there's this just incredible classic Slip Down Break Knot, or
Slip Down Break Knot.
Wow, I died there. Slipknot Breakdown. And I don't know, it's one of the more catchy choruses that they've done recently. So, and it's got their more, it does the thing that they do where it's like more soft hard. It's like it's a soft metal song rather than, you know, anything like that. So yeah, that is that.
All right, my number 2 album, and screw all of you who say I'm wrong, I am right, is Heroin by Thornhill.
He's wrong.
No, I am not wrong.
He's wrong.
This album is so good, and I know that it was controversial, and on a serious note, I can understand why people don't like it. It is a huge regime change in their sound, and it is very different for them. And when I heard the first single, I thought the lead single was legitimately terrible when I first heard it. But now I have grown on the lead single. I like almost every song on this album, I will say. I think it is... when I was first listening to the album, and when the opening song, The Hellfire Club, comes on, I was immediately just like so intrigued with like what they were going for. The first time I listened to it, I wasn't having any particular reaction. I was just sort of letting it sink over me. Although Blue Velvet did immediately stand out to me when I first heard it. But then I continued to listen to it more and more, and the more I sort of fell in love with this album. I personally think Leather Wings should have been the lead single. That one is more reminiscent of The Dark Pool than any other song on the album, in my opinion, especially those nasty screams at the end that just sort of come out of nowhere. Archangel is a really menacing cut that gives me sort of 2000s nostalgia. I really like that one, and the sort of acoustic guitar that goes throughout it. Hollywood is a very ambitious cut about a relationship between like 2 Hollywood elites gone wrong, and it's a really cool cut. Really has some cool shifts in it, and I love the use of synths in the song. It gives it this 80s feel that I really like. And then Heroin, I just think Heroin is sort of like showing Thornhill at maybe their most talented on a closing track. I really love what this song does. It is so haunting, and I think really leaves an album on a definitive note. And yeah, I just love this album a lot. I just think it nails its vibe, and while it definitely is controversial, I think the sound just personally worked for me a lot. It really did. And while it's not as good as their first album, which I think their first album is probably a 5 out of 5 for me at this point. I honestly think I probably should have put it higher when I first talked about it. I put it at number 10 when we talked about it originally, and it probably should have been higher. But nevertheless, I do still think this album is really strong, and I like that Thornhill is taking risks. Then at my number 2 is a song that Joseph already talked about, but it is Sol Absentia by Era. I adored this song from the first time I heard it, and I actually might like this song better than every single one on their album proper, which I love their album proper. It's a 5 out of 5 for me, but I like this song, I think, better than all of them.
Nothing coming close to Lunar Halo. No shot for me.
I think the chorus just really clicked for me on this one a lot. I love Jesse's vocals on the chorus. It feels really epic and foreboding too, about like this absence of sunlight. It's very apocalyptic for Era, which is pretty cool for them. They don't usually do songs like about end of the world level type of stuff, and it's usually more hopeful, which is what I like about them. I like them being more hopeful, but I really like what the song goes for, and JTKV screams are awesome, and the breakdown is to die for. Era is, I don't think there's really any other band within their genre that is doing as good as Era is, and I will stick by that.
Not even close right now. All right, for the number ones, my number one album comes from, I think it's a band I've pretty much liked since the first album, and, I'll say they're not the perfect band, but this is just about the perfect album. My number one album of the year goes to Bad Omens for The Death of Peace of Mind. Up until these other four below it came up, Obsidian was The Death of Peace of Mind is absolutely one of the strongest number one albums I've listened to. Every single song could have been my favorite song off of it. It really could have. I truly believe that. I do. This album just has so many. It's just catchy. It's so well thought out, and like James said, it almost feels like a concept album. Concrete Jungle just sort of drops you right in, doesn't have a break at the beginning or anything, and I love that. Concrete Jungle probably is one of my favorite opening songs of any album, if I've got to be honest. And every single song that follows it is just perfection. There's each one has a chorus that's just addicting. Obviously the highlights, I think I share a lot of my highlights with James. The title track is really, really fun, and it goes from soft to hard to soft. Like a Villain was my favorite track up until, Who Are You sort of took it over by surprise. And the album just sort of has a lot of really interesting, unique cuts to it, I think. And I think, just making it unique is that it's one of those bands that I actually prefer if they just go with this every time. And even my least favorite song off the album, The Gray, really grew on me, and that's what sort of propelled it to my top. It's like, I just don't dislike a song from this album. I kind of realized I just don't dislike a song, and it's a very, very strong and potent album from this band, and it's fully invested me into this band as a whole. And my number one song is this one also came out of left field, but I know the reason I like this band is because they probably have my favorite Queen vocalist aside from Jesse Cash, and it's Epiphany by Floya.
The Time Value, the previous lead vocalist, yeah.
The lead vocalist is the old first Time the Valuator vocalist from How Fleeting, How Fragile. And this song is just like, it's just a feel good, hopeful song with, I hate that he left Time the Valuator, but I just cannot get enough of this guy's voice, man. He's so good. And I almost dare say his voice works just as good in the setting that he's in now, which is more of a, I don't know if I guess you'd call it alternative rock. It's a very hopeful, uplifting song. The chorus, slow down, take a breath, and let the energy flow all around you. I found a place for you and me, a remedy for the hurt we've been through. It's just a feel-good song. with a great message and really nice guitar work and this great like backing like sort of vocals that are sort of layered on top of everything, and it just sort of ends on this really high note. I suspect if this band comes out with an album that it will probably be the ending song of said album, but we will see. I hope they do, because I really like this guy and I think that the band is a really nice continuation of what he was trying to do in Time the Evaluator. So I love that song, man. Love it.
Yeah. Okay, well, my number one. So for as much as I was talking about how mainstream rock disappointed me this year, there was one very vast exception to that rule for me, and it's not surprising that it came from this band, but it's Nothing More's newest album, Spirits. This is their fourth album, I think, either fourth or fifth. I never remember how many albums they had out before this, but this may not be as good as their sophomore album, which is a straight up masterwork, but this one comes awfully close. I think it sees them going their most intense as well, which I really love. I think Johnny Hawkins' voice works super well against more intense guitar work and stuff. They go straight up into metal and gent territory in this album, in my opinion, too, which is awesome. But they managed to keep it accessible, so much so that I would say like this album would be a good gateway for anyone trying to get it into metal, because it's sort of, it has more accessible tendencies, but it is also intense enough to count under that genre. I think they just do such a good job at that. And this album is both great and frustrating. It's frustrating because it's like, why aren't more rock bands taking risks like this band is? Because they pay off in spades here, in my opinion. The whole album is great from front to back almost. I think the opener, Turn It Up Like, is a real hype fuel song. It was a lead single for the album, and it was sort of a perfect lead single because it's sort of insane. It's sort of wild what it does, but it works. You Don't Know What Love Means is sort of a more what you would expect out of Nothing More, but it is one of my favorites from them because it is what I expect from them. And it's sort of a classic relationship rocker. The closing track, Spirits, also the title track, is awesome and epic. Deja Vu has a lot of emphasis on bass and feels very eerie. And yeah, there's just so many great cuts on this album, and I really like how it all sort of ties into the conceptual thematic arc of like needing to face the darker parts of yourself, and sort of asking the question of what makes people tick, what makes them turn to their darkest parts. And it starts more worldwide about the political distress of the world, which might be a result of it, but then it goes more into the inside human condition, the things that are within us that are in reality the things that make us who we are. It's a very interesting album in that regard, and I think it's just one of the best rock albums I've heard in a long time. And my number one song of the year also comes from Nothing More, and it's called Face It. This song is massive and menacing. It's about 6.5 minutes long, and it's the song that I would say leans the most into some more gent tropes. It has a guitar breakdown that is just such a banger and left my jaw hanging open the first time I heard it, because I was not expecting it from them. And the song probably nails the thematic arc of the album the best. It's literally about someone, it sort of reminds me of like The Death of Me by Red, where it's literally about someone facing the darkest part of themselves head on. And it feels epic in that regard, like facing the darkest parts of yourself. It feels like a literal fight to the death in some ways. And like there's a sense of urgency to it, like if you don't face these parts of yourself, time will run out and that darker part will overtake you. And I really liked that. I thought it was a very strong message from the band, and musically the song nails it.
All right. Yeah, that was our critical podcast for 2022.
Our shortest one by far.
Our shortest one yet. There was just some things we didn't talk about on. That's just the way it is. So yeah. Also, we're going to be transitioning into gaming shortly, but this was our critical podcast. Always a good time to do this. A little more similarities than I thought there would be this time around, if I'm being honest. But I think this is the first time we didn't have an album or song land somewhere in the exact same place.
No, yeah, in the exact same. Yeah, that didn't happen this year.
So yeah, good stuff overall. Take a little bit of a $5 or something, and we'll be back to game in a little bit. But that'll be it for the critical podcast section of this. Thanks everybody who came in and stuff. I guess we will be back next year.